And we're recording.
Were you going to start, Elisa, or was that on me?
Oh, I think that's on you. It
Oh,
does
okay.
look like it's recording on your side, correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay, perfect. Okay, go
Okay.
for it.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to what we are dubbing agritourism opportunities for farmers during the 2024 eclipse, what you should know and how to prepare. We have 4 speakers for you today covering a broad range of topics geared towards that eclipse in 2024. And did want to go ahead and introduce ourselves today. I believe that's on the next slide. Hi, I'm Hans Schmitz. I'm a conservation agronomist with Purdue Extension and the Conservation Cropping Systems Initiative. And that doesn't seem like I should be leading a 2024 eclipse meeting, except for the fact that agricultural meteorology is my background. I have a bachelor's and master's in meteorology. So that doesn't mean I study meteors. That means weather, but space weather is a thing. And this is definitely a space weather event. And Elisa.
Hi, I'm Elisa Werland. I'm the community development and health educator in Wayne County, and we are also along the path of totality. So we've been talking a lot about the eclipse, but one of the groups that we thought could benefit from a little bit more information are some of our farmers. Given that there will be a lot of people coming in, and I hear our Airbnbs are already pretty much filled up, our hotels are filling. So trying to figure out where to put all these folks and what they can do while they're here is kind of an economic opportunity for some of our folks. So excited to jump in on this. I will be in the background today during this workshop as well. So if you have any tech issues or questions, I'll be monitoring the chat, but I'll have my camera off. So just know that I'm around.
Thanks, Elisa. And I will be in the foreground, so I apologize in advance. Now, Purdue has a broadband initiative that they are partnering with the state of Indiana to assess where broadband needs to be and what the current actual status of broadband is in the state of Indiana. If you've been to the FCC maps for your individual address, you may have noticed that a lot of entities claim to serve you that may or may not be actually serving you. So help Indiana figure out where we've got unserved, underserved areas by going to connectingindiana.com and performing a speed test that is anonymous but location based and sends that information up the chain. If you've never dealt with Purdue Extension before, that's our host today, Purdue Extension. We have different program areas. Elisa is formally with the Community Development Program area and the Health and Human Science Program area. Community Development focuses on developing communities across a broad spectrum of topics. Health and Human Sciences as well. Health, Human Sciences, many different topics. There's 4-H Youth Development, which most people are already or if they know of Purdue Extension, that's the program area they're familiar with. That's the 4-H program around the state of Indiana. And then I'm affiliated with the Agriculture and Natural Resources program area, which aims to educate on those specific topics. Our speakers today, a little bit on the 4 speakers. We're going to lead today with the meteorological side of things. So I may have impacted the webinar a little bit with that. But Sam Lashley is with the National Weather Service in Indianapolis as the WCM and state liaison. He's going to share a little bit about what the eclipse looks like from a meteorological perspective and what the state of Indiana governmental agencies are doing. Then we'll have Sarah Wolf, who is the Eclipse Director for Knox County and Vincennes, and one of probably few communities in the state that have hired an Eclipse Director. She is just a wealth of knowledge on a variety of different topics. And she'll be able to discuss whatever she really wants to, because she has the capability to do that. We have Linda Baird with Cornucopia Farm over in Scott County, Scottsburg area. And that is an agritourism enterprise that she will be able to tell you much more about, as well as some of the opportunities and challenges that she faces on a day-to-day basis. And then you see Marcia Sotswettel. They're the project scientist for the National Farm Medicine Center and National Children's Center for Rural Agricultural Health and Safety, who will be discussing some of the laws, liabilities, and legalities of agritourism. So with that, Elisa, are we ready to go ahead and turn it over? All right. Sam, you're first up. Thank you for speaking to us today.
Yeah, thanks, Hans. Great to be here. And I'm going to share my screen. And while that's coming up, I'm also going to share the website that I'm going to be showing here in the meeting notes. So looks like my screen should be sharing. So again, my name is Sam Lashley with National Weather Service here in Indianapolis. And we've put together a website that looks at weather conditions all across Indiana, sort of a one-stop shopping, to let people sort of know what to expect on April 8th, what we've seen in the past, what's likely. And then I'll talk a little bit at the end about how that might impact travel around the state on April 8th. We've been working with the Indiana Department of Homeland Security since January, having monthly planning meetings. IDHS has set these up with a lot of law enforcement, DNR, weather service, emergency management from all across the state prepping for this, because it was quickly learned after the last eclipse several years ago that impacted the central part of the United States, that people just weren't ready for what followed after the eclipse, with people moving around. Fortunately, weather was pretty good across the country, so that wasn't an issue. But with this eclipse being in April, there's a lot of potential impacts from weather. So the website you see here, just to give you an overview, we've picked several sites around the state. It's impossible, obviously, to get every single city. So we tried to spread these cities out so you can pick a city that you live by, and your conditions are going to be pretty similar. So here you can see what record temperatures were for the April 8th, what the normals are, record precipitation, and even record snowfall. All sorts of weather has happened on April 8th. And that makes it a challenge when you're preparing to have this influx of hundreds of thousands of people into a concentrated part of the state. So we want to make sure that all of our bases are covered leading up to this. But one thing that's kind of nice, if you click on one of these cities here, like Indianapolis, for example, that's going to bring up some distribution tables that shows you what has happened going back to the 1800s on April 8th. So you can see there for high temperatures, the majority of the days tend to be in the 50s, but we've had days in the 30s and we've had days in the 80s, just one day, but we've been there. So a wide range of temperature potential, very similar with low temperatures, but we tend to be in the 30s on that early part of April. So if there's people camping, things like that, it's obviously potential for some chilly nights. And then precipitation distribution. Fortunately, the majority of the days are in the dry category, but it's spread out there. So when you look at those numbers, precipitation is actually a pretty good chance on April 8th. And then your snowfall distribution, again, the majority of these days have not had snowfall, but there have been a few snowfall events dating back to the 1800s. So again, you can get that for different cities there. If we go back to our main tab, then down here on the bottom, we have some dates of severe weather that have occurred April 8th. The latest, just back in 2020, we had actually a tornado on that day. That was sort of in the early evening hours. A line of thunderstorms moved through, and that produced a tornado that went through downtown Mooresville, if any of you remember that. So again, all all forms of weather are in play on that day. Then another interesting tab here is cloud cover. And if you just click on these images, it enlarges it, makes it real nice to see. You can see the path of totality. And this is the cloud cover climatology for April 8th, going back several years. And unfortunately, you can see that based just on climatology, that the odds of cloud cover are pretty high across central Indiana in early April, anywhere from a 60 to 70% chance of having cloudy skies. We then break that down further. If we look at the percent of time between April 1st and 15th, so that first half of the month during the afternoon hours when the eclipse is going to occur, now we're looking at when the skies are 20% or less cloudy. So this is basically in the afternoon, what are the odds of having really good viewing conditions? And it's not very good from this aspect either. You're in that 20 to 30% range of having decent viewing conditions. So just based on cloud cover alone, not that great. Then we break it down even further. We're going to have an El Nino winter. And what that means is our winters tend to be drier than normal and warmer than normal with less snowfall. And going into the spring months, we actually see a little bit increase in cloud cover in the spring from El Nino. So just another piece of bad news for those wanting to see the eclipse. And you can see there it's, again, in that 70 to 80% chances of having cloudy skies. So sorry to be the bearer of bad news. If you want any hope, April 8th of this year was nearly cloud-free. It was a beautiful day. But if you look at the odds of that happening 2 years in a row, again, not very good. Then if you scroll down just real quickly, you can see satellite images from previous April 8th. So you can kind of see the variety of cloud cover across the state. So just some very fun climatological information. As we get closer to the date, a couple weeks out, we will start to put forecast information on this tab. Then we have some maps and timing for the eclipse across the state. You can see where the eclipse begins, when totality begins, its peak, and when it ends, and then when the eclipse itself ends. And down here at the bottom, I really like this. It's a nice little animation that shows the center of the eclipse. The totality is that little black dot right there. And then the big shadow is where you will at least see some of the partial eclipse. So that's a nice visual animation of what you're going to see. Then finally, in this tab, we just have some links to some other organizations and websites with more information about the eclipse. So we're trying to build this out to be as much of a one-stop shop for weather and eclipse information on behalf of the Weather Service. Just to wrap up here real quick, I already mentioned we're working with the government partners to plan for this. We will probably have a very similar meeting like this that will be up and going for our emergency management partners to check in with us on the forecast. Because again, if it's cloudy, as was already mentioned, people are booking hotels. A lot of hotels are requiring 2-night stays minimum, and people are paying a lot of money for that. So we think if it's going to be cloudy on Monday morning, people are going to get up early, check out, and then they're going to be hitting the road trying to find where skies are going to be clear. So roads could actually be very busy the morning of if we are in fact looking at cloudy skies. A lot of people are going to be moving around. So if there's any kind of weather hazards, we've got all these vehicles and traffic on the roads, and we want everybody to be prepared. So another thing to keep in mind for those of you that maybe are renting out your land for people to camp on or to sit during the eclipse, spring, especially early April, tends to be wet. The ground's wet, and there's some concern that there could be a lot of people getting stuck and a lot of need for tow trucks. So just keep that in mind if you have fields. With the El Nino, tend to be drier than normal. Maybe that will help. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. We'll take questions at the end, but that's all I've got at this point, and I'll turn it back over.
Thank you, Sam. Did want to mention that there are multiple National Weather Service offices that serve the state of Indiana. And so if you are looking for these resources, be sure you're on the National Weather Service Indianapolis page.
Yep.
All right. Well, now that we've brought everybody's bar as far down as we can, I think let's have Sarah go next and discuss what's going on in Knox County.
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Sarah Wolf. I am the rare and unusual Eclipse Director for Vincennes and Knox County. And you were correct, Hans. I have yet to meet another dedicated Eclipse Director. So I feel grateful for that opportunity. And it's also really great to be in a position where nobody wants to do what you're doing, because not a lot of people want to deal with it. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, my screen changed and I didn't know what happened. So I thought my Wi-Fi is not great back here, so I hope it's going to hold up the whole time. So I wanted to comment on something that Sam had spoke about regarding the weather, something that I have observed and had many conversations with other eclipse tourists, also known as umbrophiles. These are folks who travel eclipses or chase eclipses all over the world. These folks will often make 3 or 4 reservations along the entire path of totality. And then, 3 or 4 days before, once the weather gets dialed down and they know where it's going to be best, they will travel to that destination that has the best weather for that day. So although our odds in Indiana don't necessarily look that great, if you look north, their odds are far worse. So we anticipate a great deal of people traveling to our area, because if we're within a 6 to 8 hour drive, that's usually about as far as people are willing to do if they're coming the day of. So that's another factor to keep in mind with the weather predictions for your areas, is that if we have lovely weather, we're going to have a lot more visitors. But if our weather is even worse than it is been predicted to be, then we anticipate slightly lower numbers. However, there are lots of people who also, they're going to stick with their plan no matter what, because they don't want to run the risk of missing out on any kind of opportunity to view totality. So where I am in southern Indiana in Vincennes, I'm right along the Indiana-Illinois border, and we have 4 minutes and 5 seconds of darkness. We have the longest darkness in the state of Indiana, and we anticipate that will bring a lot more eclipse tourists to us because of it. We also have an interesting, significant historical tie-in with the 1806 eclipse. I don't know how many of you are familiar with any of our Northwest Territory history, but Vincennes is Indiana's first city, and we have a lot of really interesting history. We are also home to Grouseland and the George Rogers Clark Memorial National Historic Park. So as our country was being settled, there's a lot of conflict between the Native Americans and the white settlers that were encroaching on their land. And William Henry Harrison, who at the time was the Northwest Territory governor, he's in conflict with a couple of the tribes, one of the leaders of which is Tecumseh, who you may have heard of. He was a Shawnee chief here. Tecumseh had a brother who was known as the Prophet, who was kind of a hot mess. He shot himself in the eye with a bow and arrow. He wasn't much of a leader or really much of a prophet. And basically, it came down to this conflict with Harrison and Tecumseh and his brother, the Prophet, where Harrison sees the efforts of the Native Americans to gather their people together to fight against Harrison's encroachment. Harrison sees this and says, "Come on, guys, you're never going to get it together. I'll believe it when the sun goes dark and the river runs backwards and the dead rise out of the ground, okay? Like, come on, you're not going to do it." Well, the Prophet hears this and he's like, "Hang on, I think I've got something." So the Prophet predicts a total solar eclipse in 1806, and then it happens. And it really helped galvanize a lot of the local tribes and say, hey, you know what? This guy, maybe he knows what he's talking about. Maybe we actually can win in this fight. So because of that historical tie-in, we anticipate that there are people who want to see what that might mean to experience something like that with that knowledge and that experience here. So that's been a really cool tie-in that we have to offer that no one else has along the path of totality. So that's kind of our interesting historical tidbit to add there. We've had several community information meetings and have done a tremendous amount of outreach through the city and the county to make sure that people are educated and informed about that. So one of the things that we talk about quite frequently is the economic opportunity for property owners if they would like to host camping or lodging or just day of viewing areas, what we are encouraging people to do if they decide to offer it is to think about offering a stay for that Monday night to help mitigate traffic on that Tuesday morning. So maybe you say, hey, you can stay Saturday and Sunday night, but Monday night is free. And then they'll stay that evening and leave on Tuesday instead of Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock, because that's really one of the biggest issues that we are anticipating having to manage is just the sheer volume of traffic. I hope that if you are in the path of totality, that your public schools have decided to not be in school that day. All of our schools have decided to take they've decided to take another day. They're swapping another day on their calendar. The totality happens at 3 in the afternoon. Our schools let out at 2:45, and that's a disaster. That is an absolute disaster. So we don't want all of our kids stuck on school buses during totality, potentially for hours if the traffic is as bad as we anticipate it might be. So that's another thing that you need to consider. Churches need to consider what their plan is for their Sunday morning service. How are they going to get people to and from those things? And they may have a bigger crowd, which would be lovely. Does anybody have any questions about any of those things? No? Should I keep talking? Because I got like a 4-hour thing, but like I know we don't have that kind of time.
You have time if you'd like to keep going a little longer.
Okay, that's fine. I'd be happy to do that. Let's see, where else? You already mentioned that there's a high probability that it's going to be wet. So if you're offering any kind of camping on your property, you need to be ready with a tow truck or your tractor because you may be pulling people out of places that you didn't anticipate. So I'm going to walk you through our process of helping people decide if they want to offer camping or lodging or viewing areas. First, you decide that you're going to do it. Second, you reach out to us, and us means me or John Streeter, who is the head of our Knox County Emergency Management Agency. He can check out your place online or go out in person to help evaluate your location in terms of viewing the eclipse. Also to decide if hey, you're in a floodplain, you probably shouldn't offer camping, especially tent camping that time of year. We just kind of help you understand what you're getting yourself into. You need to understand what a serviceable road is. You need to understand that if you are offering tent camping, you need real bathrooms of some sort. Either that's a porta potty, or if you have a barn or shed that you can offer up that has facilities, you need to know what you're going to do with your trash. So let's say you want to offer camping or lodging on your back 40. I bet your field doesn't have a 911 address. So the real reason that we do what's called a site analysis is to make sure that we can get emergency services back there. It's not because we want to know what people are doing on their property necessarily, but it's to make sure that you understand what a serviceable road is, and so that we know where the mass gatherings are in case of, not great weather, in case there is a mass casualty event. People are still going to break their legs and have heart attacks regardless of the eclipse. So we need to make sure that we can get ambulance and emergency services anywhere we need to go quickly and efficiently. John Streeter is developing a system, a program for these events once we know about them. This includes not only camping and lodging, but also the day of events. If people are just parking somewhere, we would like to know where that is. And additionally, any other kind of the public or private events that are being hosted, just so we know where those things are and that we can place our first aid stations and any kind and distribute evenly any of the emergency services that are going to be established ahead of time. So after we determine your site, how many places you can offer, you don't have to have hookups. You don't have to have water hookups or any of that stuff to offer camping. In your site, on your website, or however you choose to distribute your information about what you're offering, you would state clearly that this is boondocking or dry camping. Those are both two interchangeable terms, so that the people who come to you in RVs know that they have no hookup. They would be running on their generators and carrying their water supplies with them. People who RV regularly are used to this. This should not be a new concept to them. They, of course, appreciate those amenities when they have them, but most RVers have told me that they can go 3 or 4 days before they either need to dump or refill or refuel their generator. So that's something else to consider. Another thing you want to think about is that a lot of people will drive their RV and then tow their accessory vehicle so they can drop their RV and then use their small vehicle to get into town. You want to think about how much space you want to allot for that kind of accommodation. Same thing if you're thinking of offering tent camping. We want to make sure that we encourage people to allot enough space for those tent camping spots to accommodate their vehicle, particularly if you do not have an emergency shelter in place. So that way people can hop into their cars. At least they have that kind of shelter if there is a weather emergency or some other kind of contingency where they need to take quick, immediate shelter. They can at least get in their vehicle. That's better than nothing. We really like it if people have a barn or shelter or anything that people can get inside of. Although the vast majority of our campers are hosting, or excuse me, the vast majority of our hosts are hosting campers and RVs. I don't know how popular the tent camping is going to be honest. We'll see about that. But yeah, that's kind of the big overview. I saw a question there in the chat. Yes, umbraphile, that is correct. That is the right term. Where is the best place to advertise camping? That's a great question. So once we have our information, at least this is how we do it in Knox County. Once we have your information from you, what you're going to charge, what kind of sites you're offering, what your cancellation policy is, do you have a safety plan in place? I think we have a few other questions on that list, but once we've gone over that, we place you on our website. So Vincent's Knox County Eclipse, we place you on that site, and that's one website for you to advertise. It gives you something shareable on the internet that you can distribute wherever you like. Additionally, we encourage people to use a site called Camp Spot. It's very similar to Airbnb in that you list your sites, and they have an enormous platform for people who are looking for camp spots. Now, they only recently got hip to the eclipse happening, and they've changed some of their terms and policies. It still appears to be mostly user-friendly. I think they've maybe overcomplicated things a little bit, but they probably know better than I do why they have done that. At any rate, there are sites available if you would like to have additional platforms to host that. So CampSpot is a great place to go. You can also go to, do a quick Google search or a Facebook search of Eclipse discussion groups. Those are great places to advertise your spots as well. One thing I do like about CampSpot, if you are going to offer probably more than 15 to 20 spots on your property, CampSpot will handle the reservations for you. They take a small cut. It's usually about $3 per site, but that means that they are handling the emails and the phone calls for people that want to make a reservation at your place. I think it's worth it. I would not consider doing it without that kind of help because I don't want to answer those phone calls or emails. Is there a need to consider event insurance policies if you're hosting campsites? You need to talk that over with your agent. You can usually get event insurance fairly easily. It's usually about $20 and it's got a pretty high coverage limit, but it is something that you want to talk to your agent about, and they can advise you accordingly to your policy and to your experience. But yes, you should totally talk to your insurance agent and get one-time event insurance. At least I would. Okay. Yes, and Caroline there, thank you for sharing the vincentseclipse.com site. If you are considering hosting, or if you are leading an organization, or you are helping with eclipse planning, feel free to go to our site. You can look at the camping FAQs, and that will help you as well. That's most of the things that I have gone over there. You want to think about, if you're going to let people on your property, people love to burn things. You need to think about if you're going to let them have fires on your property. Are they going to use your firewood? Are you going to let them bring their own? I would not recommend that. You should sell them your firewood. So just things like that. You can get a lot of those questions answered there on our website. And you can also see some examples of our listings that we have under accommodations, and you can see how we've set that up there. So like everybody else, all of our hotels are already booked. We only had 2 Airbnbs, so those went a long time ago. But in terms of price gouging, I was hoping someone on this panel could maybe speak to that a little bit more. It's happening all over the path of totality, and you expect that a little bit. I think people should make money. I really do. But just locally, our Hampton Inn is charging $1,700 per night with a 4-stay minimum. That is $7,000 for one weekend. That is a Honda. That's a car. That's a semester at college. I do not think that is ethical. I don't think that is okay in any way, shape, or form. And I understood on the last Indiana Department of Homeland Security call that I was on that there were some discussions of going through the state attorney general and taking this to Governor Holcomb. It's really obnoxious. And of course, the local franchise owners say that this is a chain decision. The chains all say that this is a local franchise decision. So we can't get a straight answer on who is doing this price gouging. And I mean, sure, charge a little more, but wow. And the other thing that a lot of them are doing, is that folks who did their diligence early on and made reservations months and months ago, a lot of these chains are calling those people back and saying, well, we've canceled your reservation, but you can have it back at a much higher rate that is 3 to 4 times the original rate. That is especially gross. So if anybody can do anything about that, that would be super helpful. But that's all I got.
Hans, this is Janice Lee with the Indiana Department of Homeland Security. I just wanted to chime in on what Sarah said about the price gouging. We did have a conversation about that in one of our planning meetings. She's absolutely dead on all that stuff. And you know, if it's not a disaster, it's not if it's not declared a disaster or emergency, then there's really nothing anybody can do. That's not to say that can't change, but because of that, it's like the Indianapolis 500 or any other big event, they charge more. But I just wanted to clarify that on that comment. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Janice, for the clarification. Sarah brought us up, got us to a mostly happy place, and then crashed us right back down there. That's okay. Next up, we've got Linda Baird with Cornucopia Farm. Take it away, and thanks for speaking to us today.
Okay. Really glad to have the opportunity to share a little bit about our agritourism operation here at Cornucopia Farm. We are located in Scottsburg, Indiana, actually in Washington County, though. We started growing pumpkins in 1992 with 2 acres that we sold mainly wholesale to a local market. And each year we have grown just a little bit every year. We started hosting school groups in 1995. In 1999, we started the first corn maze in our area to invite people to stay longer at our farm in hopes of selling more pumpkins. That was our goal. We also built another building and had a retail shop in that barn. In 2016, we built another building, and that makes fall more enjoyable for us and our visitors, and allows us to sell pumpkins and produce as well as retail decor for the fall. We actually have a cafe now where we sell our own beef and hamburgers and tacos, and we do pumpkin bread and pumpkin rolls. Anyway, to have more people come to our farm and enjoy that. We are a family operation. My husband Kevin and our 2 sons and their wives helped make Cornucopia what it is today. Our boys grew up in the business and have helped it grow over the years. Now Michael has 2 small sons, and hopefully we will transition to that 3rd generation if they so choose to do one of these days. They and their wives are active in making Cornucopia Farm what it is today. We also have one friend who's worked with us for over 20 years. And Kevin's brother and his wife also help. And I say all that just mainly to say, if you want to start an agritourism venue, if you want to do something for the Eclipse, or if you want to just grow something that you have, family support is critical, or a really great friend network, because the agritourism is not a 9-to-5 job. And you know, it sounds like if you're going to do Eclipse, you better plan them for at least 4 days. But it's an opportunity for us to share a farm, but it's really nice to be able to call on family members or friends that you trust to help you make decisions, but also to know how to take out the trash. And I thought that was interesting. I came up with several logistics that I think it's really important that if you're going to attempt to do something for this, some things that you consider. I think a couple of these things have been touched on briefly, but I will go through those. Number 1 is restrooms. We have restrooms in our pumpkin shed that are family bathrooms. They're really nice, but with something like this and with our fall season, We have portable porta potties that, and my husband said, be sure and tell them that they need to be clean. Please take care of those, and also have hand wash stations. We have animals on our farm, and so we also have hand washing stations near our animals. Second thing, whether you have a building or a tent, people coming to the farm want some sort of shelter, particularly if you plan to sell anything to them while they're there. Be better to have an inside and also just extra shelter. Be sure you have adequate electricity for your event. We've had electricians come in and rework our buildings and improve our electricity, because we have coolers, we have a donut fryer, we have other things like that. It's important to have electricity. And as also may have been touched on, you may need some kind of permit. Unfortunately, there's not really a central location in most counties to find out that information. Maybe at some point that might be somebody from the state may take that on. Just recently, after 25 years of doing a corn maze, we were told we needed a permit from Homeland Security. Never been told that before. So if you're going to have an event at your farm, you might need to be aware, pending your location, that someone from Homeland Security might show up unexpectedly on your farm, either before your event or during your event. So just so you be aware of that. Most counties may not require any kind of permit. Third, if you plan to sell food, and we have found out, and most agritourism places know, that if you sell food, people will buy food. So you're going to need a permit from your health department, which we have, or some people are doing food trucks. You want to be sure that they have a permit from the health department, and also get a copy of their certificate of insurance for you to keep on file. It's our experience that if you provide food, people stay longer for your agritourism. Fourth item, and definitely not far down the line, is insurance, which was mentioned. For our own personal experience, we have Farm Bureau insurance. We had a rural guardian policy, which we still have in place, because we also do corn and soybeans. We are a true traditional farm also, as well as having pumpkins and all the fall things that we do. However, we had to add a commercial policy also. Depending on what event you have, you may have to have some form of commercial policy, because is dependent on how your insurance company looks at whether Eclipse events are agritourism or not. If you're planning to have a hayride that day or any other special activities, you want to be sure and clear that through your insurance agent, because some of those things have to be shown as a rider on your policies like they do for us. Another item is ticketing, and we don't charge admission for people who come just to buy things at our farm, but with something like this, for an event or for admission to other activities on our farm, we do have a general farm admission where we do charge. And I'm assuming everyone would want to do this for an Eclipse event to make it worth your time and effort. We do use Ticket Spice for our event ticketing, and have had fairly good rapport with them. My daughter Valerie actually does a lot of that, and I would highly suggest, even if you're just providing a place for viewing on your farm, that you have some sort of ticketing process in place or prepaid tickets. Another item, a response team and safety lumped together. We have a system in place so that our staff know protocol to follow if we have missing parents and or missing children. We have a group that we notify immediately in case of those things happening. Thankfully, it's usually missing parents, and that hopefully would not happen during an eclipse, but it does occasionally happen here at the farm, and our staff know how we want that handled. So that's something you should think about. Having fire extinguishers on hand. We always have ours inspected every year. Get to know your local fire department as well as your sheriff or police department. Our county has been known to, sheriff's departments known to come out and even help unlock a customer's car. So that's some of those things that happen that you don't expect that could happen. Trash. Anytime there's public, there's trash. We use Rumpke for a dumpster service, but we also have a dump trailer to have any overflow that we have to take to the landfill ourselves. Trash pickup is a daily, an item on the daily end of day checklist for our staff and throughout the day. Interview and training, we tell everybody trash is everybody's responsibility. You would be surprised how easily trash builds up on your farm if you don't stay after it every time and every day. And even if you're just hosting this one event, I would expect a lot of trash. We have multiple trash cans in our parking area, in our pumpkin shed, all over our farm. Trash is an issue. Signage, you need some sort of plan for signage to let people know where they can and can't go on your farm, where they are allowed, or if you're offering food, where they can find the food, how much the food is. We work with a local sign company that they put together some really appealing signs for us. Yes, we still use hand-drawn signs, but overall, we try to use printed ones. So you might need to start working on that. One sign that's very important for any agritourism venue is the Indiana Agritourism Liability sign that was mentioned about the Indiana the liability law. If you don't have one of those, you need to get one. Our insurance company provides us with these signs so that we can post them in multiple locations on our farm. If you use another company, you might check with them, but if not, maybe you could have a local sign company make one similar to that. Staffing, I'm not sure how much staffing you will need if you're just having a 3 to 4 day event, but plan to lose at least 10% of those that you hire. Something seems to happen. We have about 40 part-time staff people in the fall season. We use home base. Again, it might not be something that you need for a one-time event, but it's something that we use that really helps us. Something I wish I had started using sooner in our growth pattern. Financial, you might need to look at how your farm is set up. If this is a new process for you, agritourism, you might want to separate that from your regular farming operation. Because like I say, we also do grain, and so we have a separate. We always had a separate farm checking account, but we separate the cornucopia farm from the rest of the farm as far as accounting is concerned. We have a CPA that does our taxes. We use QuickBooks. Starting out small, you might not think all this is necessary, but if this is something you want to plan to add to for the future, I would highly recommend you start smart. We actually have an LLC. That Cornucopia Farm is its own LLC, so it's separate from our actual farm property, and helps separate that legally. One thing I also recommend that if you plan to, at this event, if you want to sell anything, which I highly recommend you do, if you're going to go the trouble of hosting people, you need some kind of pause system. We use Square, and it's readily available, even if just using your iPhone or Android, you can use that. Some sources of information that we have used. Extension is a very valuable information. With North American Direct Farm Market Association is a great place to get information. Advertising, I'll address that just a little bit. Word of mouth, Facebook, Instagram. Our daughter-in-law takes care of that, and I think that would be very valuable for this program too. I think my time is about up. So if I'll pass on to the next person. If anybody has any questions at the end, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right. Thank you, Linda. Important information being shared in the chat, the link to Cornucopia's Farms website. And I realize not everybody here binge watches Bar Rescue and knows what POS means. So thanks for adding that into the chat. So now we will turn things over to Marcia and allow her to take it away. You do not have audio, Marcia.
All right, can you hear me now?
There we go.
Sound like a Verizon commercial, don't I? Well, thank you everybody for allowing me to be here and talk with you for a few minutes today. I'm going to very, very quickly go over some of this information, but I am very happy to actually share some additional information or answer questions at the end, or you can email me as well. So why risk management? Well, there's a lot of reasons for risk management, why people are doing this type of thing. Everything from caring about guests and workers, reputation. People care about their reputation. Some people use it as a marketing strategy. People want to recruit workers. If you do a good job of managing your risk and you have a safer workplace, you're more likely to keep and retain your workers. It does save you money. It does tell us, the studies tell us that for every dollar that you invest in safety, you'll get a $4 to $6 return. And of course, liability is a huge issue nowadays. People are concerned about. The farmers I talk to all the time are like, I'm just worried about being sued so often. So those are the types of things, among other reasons, why people care about risk management. So one of the things that I did want to touch base on was the relationship with risk and safety. And so farms in general tend to be a fairly high risk environment, as a high risk work site as far as injuries and fatalities, one of the highest risks in the country. But you can actually reduce that risk by implementing some safety strategies and following some other types of strategies that we're going to talk about very briefly here today. But my point is, with this little diagram here, is where you fall on this continuum is going to be up to any individual person. Some people tend to be bigger risk takers. Other people want to be as safe as they can possibly be. And so where you are going to fall on this is going to be entirely up to you, and where you actually want to be on that. So there's a lot of different things that can impact your risk and your risk tolerance. We're going to talk very quickly through a few of those. So one of the things that Linda brought up was the agritourism liability law. And so with the Indiana agritourism liability law, you heard Linda mention the sign. You either have to post a sign or you have to have a written release that you have your visitors sign, either of which must contain the language that's here in yellow that Linda was talking about. Now, that sign, if you have the sign itself, it has to be placed in a clearly visible location at the main entrance, and the letters have to be in black, and they have to be at least 1 inch high. So if you can actually find a place that has these pre-manufactured, that's going to be the easiest way for you to go about doing that. So one of the cautions about the liability law so many times, so many of the farmers said, well, I posted the sign, I've got the sign, so I'm covered, right? Well, yes and no. The one thing you need to keep in mind is liability laws do not provide blanket immunity. Usually, agritourism liability laws will protect against inherent risks. And a little bit better than half of the states in the US have agritourism liability laws. And all of them tend to be the same, that they will protect against these inherent risks, natural conditions of the land. So if you have an odd divot in your land or something like that, that will take, it'll protect against that type of stuff. If some of the behavior of the wild animals or domestic animals, ordinary dangers of structures or equipment. And if you have a participant that comes onto the farm and just doesn't follow your instructions or follow your signage, it will protect you against that. But what they don't protect you against is anything that you knew about or should have known about that's a hazard. So for instance, I had a farmer one time that mentioned to me he had a big market, an agritourism market on his farm. And in the front of the market, he had a tree with some low-hanging branches. And he mentioned to me that he had people that would allow their kids to climb that tree. And that's not what the tree was designed for. But that people would actually do that. And so I recommended to him that he's going to want to post at a minimum, post a sign that says, please do not climb the tree. Or if you want to be a little bit stronger about it, don't, be more blunt with the signage. And that would, on that risk continuum line, that would put you a little bit down off of the risk and a little bit more towards the safety. But if you want to get further down towards the safety end of that, what you would probably want to do is just fence off the tree so that the kids can't get to it at all. So again, where you want to be on that continuum is up to you. But there's different ways to address and to reduce risk, and how protective you want to be is going to determine how much you're going to do. So there are dangerous conditions of the land, which is like the tree that I just mentioned, or the facilities or the equipment. If you have an animal that has a behavioral issue, for instance, if I'm doing an agritourism operation and I have a horse that I know likes to buck people off, and I put one of my visitors on that horse, but don't warn him that, that it is, and it's one of my beginning riders, that it's not going to protect you in that type of an instant. Or if you commit an act that constitutes willful or wanton disregard for safety, you are obligated under the law to do what they call exercising ordinary care, and to also work to actively discover and address hazards. And so one of the challenges that the farmers that I've worked with have said, well, what's ordinary care and how do I discover and address hazards? I had a farmer one time I mentioned to him a bench that was partially sunk into the ground and ready to tip over. And he said, I walked by that. And the first couple of times I walked by it, I thought I got to fix that. And he said, pretty soon it became part of the landscape. And he said, I don't even notice it anymore. He says, how do I discover hazards like that are just part of my landscape? And so I'm going to introduce you to a website in a little while that actually lays out what the best practices are for safety, which is how you exercise ordinary care is by following those best practices, and also has checklists that you can use to help you discover and address those hazards. Also, if you would intentionally go out and injure somebody who's visiting your property. So if somebody came onto your land and you said, oh, I don't like you, and you just took a gun out and shot them, you would be liable. This law wouldn't protect you then. Not that anybody would do that, but I wanted to use an extreme example. Or if you fail to properly train your employees, and that is Indiana law, that you have to properly train your employees. Not every state has that caveat, but it is an important one for the Indiana law as well. So this is the website that I mentioned. It has walkthroughs that you can take in different categories. Everything, there's a parking and traffic one, there's playground ones, there's petting zoos, there's large animal safety, there's farm markets, there's just all different types of walkthroughs that you can go to, and it will teach you about those best practices and what you need to do to exercise ordinary care. and also has checklists that will help you identify health and safety hazards on your farm. So it helps you to discover those dangers and actively look for them. But in addition to that, we took it one step further, and we have over 200 resources on this site as well that you can use to fix the issues. Everything from refrigerator temperature logs to incident reports to different types of signage, to different policies and procedure templates, including an emergency response template. So, and everything is free. So this website, if you're going to take on something like agritourism, even if it's just for a one-time short-term event, this website, especially the checklists and the resource pages, can really be your friend. So I'd strongly encourage you to check it out. Some of the considerations people already talked about, parking and traffic, especially in an event like Solar Eclipse, could be a big nightmare. And so it's important for you to think through where people are parking. How does the traffic flow in and out? What happens if it rains? There was a incident in Vermont a little while back in Addison County where they got a bad rainfall, and they ended up with hundreds of cars that were stuck in the field that they were using to park, and ended up having to try and figure out how to get them all pulled out. And if you're the farmer and you decide you're going to pull them out with your tractor, just keep in mind that that may increase your liability as well. So that's something else to think about, is what if you pull that out with your tractor and you damage the car? So those are things to kind of think through, as well as these are a couple of examples of signs that are available on the website. And as was mentioned by several other people, consider coordinating with local police departments. Sanitation and restrooms were mentioned previously. Linda mentioned them, adequate facilities, including renting portable toilets. And I was really happy to hear her say, don't forget about the hand washing stations. Keeping in mind that hand sanitizer is helpful, but it's not sufficient in some cases. It doesn't kill all the bugs all the time. And so while hand sanitizer is helpful, it's not a be all and an end all. You really do want to have some actual hand washing station, and make sure also that you have potable water available for hydration. You know, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, it's not going to be that hot that day, more than likely, but at the same time, you don't want people to dehydrate either. Emergency preparedness, make sure you have an established procedure. How are you going to communicate if somebody, if you, as Linda mentioned, if you have that lost child, or one of the more common things we're seeing now is lost seniors as well. Those silver alerts are getting to be more of an issue. Who's in charge? Who do you need to let know? And who's going to organize the search for the person or the exodus if you need to get a lot of people out of the parking lot in a quick hurry or whatever? Who's in charge? And then consider using an incident report form. And there's one that's pictured right here. That's one of the templates that's available on the website, just so that if something does go wrong, you have some documentation for later on. And make sure you connect with your fire and your emergency medical services ahead of time as well. And I think Linda mentioned that as well. Just let them know, or Sarah might have mentioned it as well. Walkways and structures, you know, it's important to make sure that your paths are clearly marked, check for uneven surfaces and trip hazards, and post those areas that are off limits to guests so that you can make sure those guests stay out. Working farms typically have machinery that has sharp edges. There's chemicals, there's all different kinds of places where you don't want people. So make sure you get them the signage out there that they shouldn't be going in there. And that is off limits, and lock it up if you can as well. And again, these are just a couple more signs that are available on the website. Do not be shy about using signage to communicate, and make sure you walk your paths regularly. And as Linda mentioned, clean them up as needed. Food safety, coordinate with your state. Other activities, if you have them, you know, think about if you're going to have a lot of kids, what are they going to be playing? Are they going to, you're going to have a lot of traffic? Think that through a little bit. And also, how do you communicate with your guests? You may have some opportunities ahead of time via websites. If they're registering to stay, you may have email addresses, that type of thing as well. And then insurance has been touched on a couple of different times. And I will just mention that there's guidance on both insurance and communicating with your guests, as well as all of the rest of the stuff on that agritourism website. One final note, whatever you do to increase the safety on your farm, make sure that you document it. If you do the inspections and use a checklist, keep copies of the checklist. Have your policies and procedures written, dated, and reviewed regularly. Make sure your employees are trained. Make sure you document all your safety strategies. Then when you put signs up, take pictures of it. Make sure everything is documented. Because if some incident would happen and it's not documented and you don't have proof that you had that sign up, in the court of law, they're going to consider it not done. So these are just a summation of the strategies that we just mentioned as far as, addressing risk within your farm. And again, the Safe Agritourism website where all of those resources are available, as well as a couple of other links here as well. And then with that, I did want to make one more caveat here. I am an agritourism safety specialist. I am not a lawyer. So before you make any legal decisions at all, I can give you some guidance that's really good from across a number of states from a liability perspective. But if you have true legal questions, make sure you you check in with your lawyer. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Marcia. That was excellent. We did have a question from Elisa in the chat, I believe, for Marcia, and I'm going to pop a poll up right now if people wouldn't mind participating.
All right. So I couldn't see the chat while I was presenting. What is considered an agritourism site? Who falls under that category? So my suggestion to you is to go and take a look at your agritourism liability law for Indiana. You can Google it. The different states have agritourism defined. In some states, you have to be charging for it. Some states, if you take $1 from anybody, you're considered an agritourism operator. In other states, it has to be over a certain amount, like $2,000. In other states, just bringing visitors onto your farm, whether you get paid or not, classes you as an agritourism operation. So if you want to know on your state, if your state has an agritourism liability law, you can Google your state law and you can check to see what that description is. Some states include hunting, other states do not include hunting, that type of thing. From my perspective, when I'm talking from a safety perspective, anytime you bring a visitor onto your farm, you're doing agritourism, whether you get paid or not. But that's just from my safety perspective. That's not a legal answer.
All right. Any other questions? We'll take them at this time. I'm going to leave the poll up for about 60 more seconds for anyone that hasn't filled it out to go ahead and answer those 3 questions. Feel free to unmute yourself or to put something in the chat.
Got one
Okay.
question asking where the recording will be posted, Hans.
Well, so we have discussed this a little bit, and it's probably the answer is multiple places. There is a community development website for the Eclipse, and it's going to take me too long to figure out. There it is. All right. It will be embedded there in some way, shape, or form. There may also be another site developed by Purdue Extension as a whole. We're not sure on that yet. So your best bet is the link that was just posted in the chat. And in order to get that up, I believe we've got to go through YouTube to get there. So you could also probably search Just the Right Thing on YouTube and get there without having to go to the website. But we appreciate your clicks. All right. Well, without any further questions, we'll go ahead and wish you a great afternoon, rest of your evening, and thank the presenters for presenting today. Much appreciated.